matter where you go, no matter what you do, take that Maui style with you. Cause if you ain't Maui styling, you just living on an island. Maui styling, don't let me down. 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 There is sunshine in your heart. It's been with you from the start. Lift your head, look to the heavens, then you will feel brand new again. Don't stop me now, Maui styling, don't let me down. 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 Reach out your hand and help each other. Your mother, your father, your sister and brother. There is love in this family. Pick yourself up and get on your feet. Don't stop me now, Maui styling, don't let me down. 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 Makena styling, up country styling, Campo styling, Kahanapali styling, Hana styling, Waiehu styling, Bahia styling, Keanai styling. Maui styling, don't let me down. 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 Maui styling, Maui styling, Maui styling, don't stop me now. Maui styling.
Aloha, welcome to another Mama Presents. Today I have someone you've seen here before, Dr. Lorrin Pang from the State of Hawaii Department of Health.
Yes.
Thank you for joining me here on the show.
You're welcome. Today I will speak as a private citizen because this might not be the position of the Department of Health.
I was just going to announce officially, although I know you in your official capacities, as a private citizen you have many things that are outside your realm of jurisdiction or things that you can speak to and about.
Correct.
And so, very clear that you're speaking as a private citizen.
But they don't, they're not outside the realm of what I used to do
Okay.
before I took this job.
Well, let me just quickly refresh you, the audience, recollection here. Many of you know Dr. Pang because he's been a strong advocate of different public health issues over the time. But most recently there were conversations about genetically modified organisms, and we did a couple of shows and rebuttals and things to give the public a chance to get up close and personal on a very important issue. And we've been speaking over time, and you know, Dr. Pang, this is what he's doing all the time, involved in things with health, and has come upon strong opinions and things that he thinks the public needs to know and understand, and that's what prompted this getting together today. And I'm very happy to be here with you. If there's anything that you need of our public, everyone out here who watches, we want your involvement. So if there's anything that's said here today that you want to get in touch with Dr. Pang, because the subjects we're talking about are not state, you can surely get together answers through me at the Maui Arts and Music Association, but also if you want to put up numbers at the end or whatever, you're welcome. Okay?
That's fine.
So what prompted this this show? Why are we together?
Okay, this is a show that I was asked to look into a certain topic, and the more I studied it, the more shocked I was. And I think it's time to begin to inform the public some things, some areas of concern.
Okay.
Kind of like genetically modified crops. It's not really clear what's going on, but it's best to inform the public what we knew or what we don't know or where we stand on that. So there's another issue now that has surfaced, and that is depleted uranium. Okay.
Oh,
Now, let me just give you a little bit background.
please.
Before I speak, once again, remember, I do this as a private citizen, but you might say, well, in your former work, what qualifies you, me, to speak?
What was your former work?
Okay, my former work. I've been a consultant to the World Health Organization since 1985, an active consultant. I've done many dozens of missions for them. I've looked at drugs, vaccines, and diagnostics, the safety and the efficacy. Remember that I was looking at safety things. I was also at the time active duty. I retired after 20 years, mostly working for Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. I have the Research and Development Award. They only give one a year. For 1987 for clinical work I had done with them. I was elected last year as one of America's best doctors. They give this to 3% of the doctors in this field, and my field happens to be preventive medicine. And finally, because we will jump quickly to the military aspects of depleted uranium, I was preventive medicine officer from 1987 to 1990 for the Western Command. Based out of Tripler, it was U.S. Army Pacific and the Western Command. And if you say, well, what is the preventive medicine officer? They're the ones in charge of environmental programs and occupational health, both in the military and when it seeps and spreads to state or other countries' areas. The Johnston Island, the atoll, the burn-off of the chemical agents. I was responsible for the occupational health and environmental safety of that. So I have experience with the rules, and I have experience with the mandates of who does what when the military or federal rules overlap with state or local jurisdictions. Okay? So, depleted uranium. Let me give you a little background. I was asked to look at this about a year and a half ago, and I think I looked at it on behalf of the Maui Peace Group.
Maui Peace
Coalition.
Action Group. Uh-huh.
I don't have an opinion one way or the other about peace or not peace, but this specific point was raised. Now, if you try to use these arguments I'm going to give you in the next 20 minutes as to say that, yes, based on his arguments, we need peace, or we should stop the war. I'm not saying we should stop the war or shouldn't stop the war. I am just looking at a specific, trying to get an objective view of what's going on here, so that if we do continue the war, I want you to be forewarned of the consequences that might occur. And if we do stop the war, I want you to be forewarned of the things we might have to take care of in retrospect.
So in other words, if we're still fighting, what things are going on that
Yes.
you'd like to see stopped,
Yes.
let's say. And if we stop what we've already done,
Yes,
okay.
exactly.
So
All right.
you want to be, go ahead, try to be specific.
We're talking
You
about
guys
depleted,
understand, right?
depleted uranium.
As-
Depleted uranium is the metal uranium after you've taken out the stuff. Uranium is in different isotopes. 234, 235, 238. The best isotope for nuclear reactors, a lot of fission or fusion or the reaction is 235. So when you find natural uranium, you want to concentrate the 235 and kind of throw away the 238.
These are like different brands,
Different isotopes,
different isotopes, meaning,
technically different number of neutrons,
okay,
but
Ones that
it
are
leads
stable
to
almost
different radioactivities.
I see.
You want it to be radioactive to run your nuclear plant, so you're concentrating the 235.
okay.
After you concentrate that, you got this kind of waste uranium, the 238. They call it depleted of the active substance. It's relatively depleted. So you got all this depleted uranium piling up. It's relatively safe. It's not that radioactive anymore, and it's piling up all over the place. stockyards and all, because we've been generating uranium for reactors. Okay. Some people say, what do we do with it other than the fact it's piling up?
Can't burn it, can't destroy it, pretty much.
Well, technically we could have just buried it again, I guess, but meanwhile it's piling up. Then there was a discovery that uranium, this metal itself, regardless of the isotope, uranium is very, very heavy. And when fired at high speed, that uranium slug, which say is about maybe, sometimes it's as big as this pencils, it's a slug, it's a rod. When that hits metal, the weight will pierce the metal, and it has another property. On impact, that friction is enough to ignite the uranium, and it explodes and burns at very, very high temperatures spontaneously.
Yeah.
So if you want to take out a tank, you don't have to fire an explosive into the tank. You just fire a uranium rod, pierces the tank and blows up. And you have movies of this. I first saw it at demo, remember I'm retired military in 1982, and they brought these things online. If you want to kill a person, you can still use lead. You don't have to ignite uranium to kill the person. But specifically for armor piercing, they use uranium slugs and rods. Okay? Now, they'll also use it in the armor itself, because if the thing is so dense, well, maybe we should put it in armor. So now you have uranium against uranium. But when fired at high velocity, once again, when fired out and when impact, it burns explosively at high temperatures. Okay? And it's in many, many of the munitions. The first Gulf War, they used lots of this. All right. Now what? That slug, that metal, is depleted uranium. Now there's accusations that they have not depleted it totally, that they're using natural uranium, which is still a little hotter, more radioactive. Forget that for now. Let's just say you use depleted uranium, although that's controversial. So what? Depleted uranium sitting alone as a doorstop, to me, is not all that dangerous. It's depleted of its radioactivity. Even when it's radioactive, even uranium that's hot, it puts out what they call alpha particles. There's a different kind of radiation. Alpha particles are big. They pack a lot of energy, but they're so big, they're stopped. Alpha particles can be blocked by something as thin as the sheet of paper. It's blocked by your skin. So if I brought a chunk of uranium near you, certainly depleted uranium, it wouldn't get into you. It's blocked by your skin. And sometimes it doesn't even transfer through the air that well because the air particles block it.
Wow.
So outside the body, things like uranium that emit alpha particles are not that dangerous. But within the body, if somehow you were to get uranium into your cells in your body, it is the most dangerous form of radiation because it's up close, right next to your cells or your chromosomes, and it packs a wallop. It has high energy. Alpha particles are big. Okay, so.
And can't get out because of the same rule going in, going out, right? It's thick. So once it's in, it's in.
Well, once the radiation hits, it does its damage. Once the uranium is in, that's debatable. Some uranium can be peed out. It's in your blood, it's soluble. Depends on the form, it might not come out. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But we do have this notion that depleted uranium, sometimes it's safe as a doorstop. Sometimes if I could put it in a form that could get into your body, then it's not safe. It's kind of like cigarettes. You're against cigarettes? I'm not against cigarettes until you light them. It's as simple as that. So when uranium is used as a weapon, it burns. And the toxicity of that is not like DU, depleted uranium, as a doorstop. What happens when it burns? We know that when we burn it, experimentally or field observations, 50% of the weight seems to aerosolize. And when it aerosolizes, it forms different compounds. It burn means combined with oxygen. It's now called uranium oxides, small particles. Sometimes it's just uranium gas. Nonetheless, it goes up into the air, stuff you can breathe. Now, how far does this plume of uranium, aerosolized uranium, go? People have shown it goes dozens of miles. There's claims, and I know there's claims, but when I check out the science behind this, I'm not real sure but some people claim it can drift from the Mideast to England in the matter of a week. They say it can circle the globe in 6 weeks. Nonetheless, it surely goes 10 to 12 miles, the plume of this aerosolized stuff. So now you have a plume, no longer the doorstop. That 50% that was heavy, that broke into big chunks, it's kind of down on the ground. It went down. Okay, the other stuff is going. When you breathe the other stuff, what happens? First of all, you have radioactive particles now being internalized. Second of all, so maybe you could clear it. If I breathe in stuff, my body can clear it. We have natural protection. Turns out that some forms of this aerosolized uranium, it is not soluble. It will not be cleared for maybe 70 years,
Oh boy.
if at all. What forms are these? They're called the oxides. When uranium, it's free as a little molecule, it burns, it combines with oxygen. The lingo is called a ceramic. A ceramic is stable. The lingo is also calls it a glass. So you have these uranium oxide molecules, which you breathe, get into your lung, and are not soluble. They don't clear. They don't clear. They're not reactive. They don't bind to liquids to get in your blood and pee it out. Metallic uranium, not oxides, will clear. When a person gets a chunk of shrapnel in them, we see urine coming out of uranium coming out in their urine. So metallic stuff is soluble and clears. There's yet another form of uranium, not oxide, but metallic, or small. It's called nanoparticles. If you look up nanotechnology, nano simply means on a molecular level, very, very small. There's a whole science called nanotoxicity. And we find that on very small particle levels, many things, not just uranium, gold, have some very, very strange toxicities and very, very strange properties. For example, a lump of gold at room temperature is solid. A very, very thin nano layer, 1 molecule thick, behaves like a liquid. Gold is quite stable. You can put it through your teeth. A chunk of it doesn't react. A nanoparticle of gold, highly reactive, toxicity is unknown. Nanotechnology, which is new, cutting edge, check out nanotoxicity. Look it up on Wikipedia. It is unknown, fascinating, and very active.
Is that sort of like a homeopathy level? At that kind of a, is that what you're talking about?
It's more bizarre than that.
Really?
Normally, we are not exposed to molecular levels of chemicals, except oxygen, water, sodium chloride. We know how to handle these things. But when you start to molecularize, in the gas form, heavy metals, uranium, gold, now we don't molecularize gold, then you're asking for strange things. So once again, in summary, you have the oxides, which we know bind and are not soluble, held in the body. You have the small particles of uranium on the nano level, which go into the body, react very differently, and sometimes some people claim they're not cleared by the body ever. Okay? These two things have chemical toxicity in and of their own. Chemical, heavy metals. Remember mercury, we were worried about that?
Yeah.
Besides the chemical nature, the chemistry will determine if it's cleared by the body and where it goes. Does it stay in your lung? Does it travel to your brain? Does it travel to your bladder? That's the chemistry of it. Don't forget, there's always tied to this the radiation. You have those alpha particles emitted up front and close into the tissues and the cells. The worst form of radiation is now disseminated in your body depending on the toxicity. Depending on the chemical nature. And where do these things go? Well, we know that the oxides, insoluble forms, they seem to be picked up by the lymphatic system. That's very interesting, but it's not, the medical guys will tell you, yeah, that makes sense. Things that aren't dissolved are moved, picked up by the cells of the lymph nodes. And the lymph system, in your body there's the blood system, there's a lymph system, kind of a old evolutionary system that circulates in your body too. There's lymph all over.
To eliminate waste.
To eliminate things that are picked up, like particles. Not waste so much. Waste is the blood system, things that are soluble. Lymph system picks up little particles, exactly like insoluble uranium ceramics.
Uh-oh.
And the lymph system travels all over. It goes all over. And
Yeah.
so some people say, gee, Dr. Pang, I believe your toxicity of the lung because we breathe it, but I just don't see how it causes birth defects. You remember the whole Gulf War syndrome, all these strange things, muscular skeletal, birth defects, brain changes, neural defects. How can something breathe in cause those defects? Well, it surely can if it distributes to the lymph system. It surely can if the gas, the nanotoxicity, diffuses all over it. The nanotoxicity, just the molecular form, has been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier, everything. So now we have quite unknown, quite potentially toxic stuff being released in plumes, blowing for tens of miles to be inhaled. Now, so what's the problem here? Well, first of all,
I heard problems already.
there's lots of accusations on the internet. There's kind of wild claims. And it was my job to kind of find these people, check out their credentials. So right now I'm going to quote a lot of the work of one of the world's authority, Dr. Rosalie Bertel. She's got the publications behind her. She gives testimony before the United Nations and all. And I'm in correspondence with her, and I quite believe what she says. Prove to me that these fumes and plumes are toxic, that they spread. The military's position is that, I've read the military's position. You remember I used to be the environmental officer for the Pacific Army Command.
Yeah.
I know their position. In those days we didn't deal with DU, but their position is DU is a little bit dangerous because of the alpha particles, but when we explode the tank, the particles sink down. They're in that area. And the rule is get out of 10-yard or maybe 20-yard radius because that area is hot. Okay? Their next position is the little particles might go a little farther than this distance. I'm kind of summarizing it. They do recognize that on impact, some of the particles become friable, small. Maybe they could be inhaled. So watch out. Okay. How far does that plume go? Well, it's heavy and it sits down. So I haven't been to the meetings, but they have been meeting with Department of Health, Hawaii people, and the position is that it settles down. And if it doesn't, it's in particle chunks that will settle down.
With no distance at all, still. Less than a mile.
They didn't tell me the distance, but we know Tel's work. We have incidents where people were processing DU. They detect the plumes dozens of miles away, had to shut down the plant. Dr. Bertel's work said that after the first Gulf War they fought into Kuwait. They retook Kuwait. They didn't invade Iraq then, but downwind in Iraq, the civilians, I guess they breathed the fumes. A lot of them, 9 years after the Gulf War, have depleted uranium particles detected in their urine. The military has a screening process. Our Gulf War veterans come back, we sample their urine on a one-shot test, and we don't see too much. In fact, the only time we see stuff in Gulf War veterans' urines is if they have embedded shrapnel. Is there stuff in their lung? You will not see stuff in their lung unless you do a 24-hour capture, something more sensitive to pick up the smaller amounts in their lung. Just because you see a small amount, if you have to do such a long urine capture to see a small amount, does that mean you have a small amount in your body? Of course not. It's in your lung, it's insoluble. So you got this big load in your lung, little bit is soluble. That's what you see in your urine if you capture your urine 24 hours. I want to up it to 48. Dr. Bertel says 24 is enough, it's sensitive. The Iraqi citizens, 9 years after the Gulf War, show it in their urine. So what we see in the urine is a marker of stuff you have in the lung, especially 9 years after the exposure. Now, you could argue that, well, their exposures right now, how do you know it was 9 years ago? We have people who haven't been exposed for 9 years. They moved out of the area, or the Balkan conflict. Okay. And this stuff was just published as the way to detect it. Now, I've already told you how it spreads to the body and can create a whole bunch of strange symptoms.
Yeah.
And this seems to be, more and more as I look, seems to be the explanation for the Gulf War syndrome. As you follow the Gulf War veterans, I believe there's 800,000. a third of them now have these syndromes, funny, vague, chronic syndromes, and they can't seem to pin down the cause. That doesn't mean the syndrome isn't real. But this has got to be looked at. We have a new test, the 24-hour urine. Let's look at it. What does that have to do with Hawaii? Hawaii, they claim they never used DU on the firing ranges. Then last year, people found the casings. I think it's called Davy Crockett casing or something. They have the casings of DU. And so they confronted the military and said, hey, did you use DU or not? And I don't know if the military knew or didn't know, but they said, well, to the best of our knowledge, we didn't. And so there's a bill now to say, well, let's go see. Let's go sample the target areas where there were tank demolitions and sample the soil. Well, apparently,
Military blocking it?
well, there were 4 bills to monitor Hawaii National Guard who returned, medical side to go sample the soil, and I guess all 4 bills got blocked. Oh, sorry, 3. The final bill, that's when they called me. I didn't know you guys were putting forth bills. The final bill says we allow sampling, but you can't get closer than 500 yards to a military installation. I just told you when a bomb goes off, they tell you to run away 10 yards, maybe 30 yards. 500 yards, you're not even at that's the boundary of the military installation. I want to move it to the target site where the impact occurred. What you find at the target site is a marker that a plume went up. Whatever you find at the target site, remember, it's just a marker. I'm not afraid of what's at the target site, but it does mean a plume has gone up. And now, let's talk about jurisdiction and laws. When I was with the Army, Preventive Medicine Officer, we would follow the most stringent environmental issues. We would follow the most stringent rules. State, federal, military, or country of jurisdiction if we operated in Thailand, whichever is more stringent. So if the state were to pass a law that says we will sample at your target site, at the impact site, none of this 500 yards from the boundary, gee, that's more stringent. That's the more sensitive test. And I hope and expect the military to follow that rule. Now, I think the only loophole they could say we don't agree is maybe there's some kind of Homeland Security rule which overrides this. None that I know of. I just checked this up. There's a military officer who was retired because of disability. His name is Doug Rocky. And he wrote the rules. We don't see any kind of that inclusion on this one. Not only are you supposed to follow the most stringent rule, but the military is supposed to pay for it. Okay, the UH has the technical capacity to do the test on soil to see if uranium or DU was used.
Right.
The implications are that the plume went into state air, blew off the installation, breathed by state civilians, and so we should look. Now, I'm not saying it happened, but we should look. Is there some kind of precedent for this? Well, when I was with the Army in 1987, some of you who were around then remember something called TCE, trichloroethylene. These were lubricants, somehow got into our groundwater, carcinogenic. We don't know how it occurred. I think it was on Schofield Barracks. Maybe the motor pool in the Second World War leaked it into the ground. Nonetheless, we follow the rules. It's going into the state aquifer. And we paid for the sampling and the cleanup. We put in $1 million filters to filter it out of the water, the drinking water, things like that. We had an incinerator, a tripler. You have state rules for emissions. We follow state rules. And we worked with the Department of Health to come on and do it. And of course, we paid for the monitoring and paid for the modifications. So I'm not asking for anything different.
Right.
What is different on this case is that if people in Hawaii start to look and start to wonder and worry, aren't other people going to look too, like the Iraqi civilians? Isn't the National Guard going to say, hey, all that Gulf War syndrome we have, can you do the sensitive 24-hour screening test to see if it's related to inhaled insoluble uranium oxides? If it was me, I would ask. So I really did approach this issue as out of ignorance. People didn't know, they didn't know, they didn't know. There are some people in the military who have retired on disability. They claim they're ill because of depleted uranium. this was the officer who studied it. He was the health radiation officer. He wrote the manual. He claimed it's not ignorance. He claims it's cover-up and maliciousness. He claims that, now I haven't quite agreed or checked it, or I don't know him well enough to know his credibility, but they claim that why would you cover this up? Because if it is that dangerous and you're going to fight a war, you have to resort to other kind of munitions that don't damage the environment, don't blow down into the civilians.
Right.
You remember the first Gulf War, they burned the oil fields, and there was kind of an EPA outcry, hey, polluting it, like, let's suspend the war while we put out those oil fields. Kind of same thing. You'd have to find alternate munitions. You'd have to, if you're going to fight the war, you'd have to find alternate classical munitions. You'd have to screen people who are exposed, like at least the Gulf War veterans. You'd have to screen civilians in the areas. We've had doctors come out of the Balkans who came to Maui to claim that their birth rates are very strange and their defects in the babies are horrendous and unusual. Then you'd have to compensate. The compensation would probably could bankrupt the U.S. There is no liability. If they ask for compensation, there is no liability if you didn't know. If you say, I'm sorry these things happened to you, we didn't know, I'm sorry. But if you did know, then there's
They
liability.
do know, huh?
This is kind of like tobacco.
Oh boy.
Tobacco, when you sue, you win the suit because the tobacco company knew. But if the tobacco company truly didn't know it was toxic, then it causes cancer and we're sorry. There's no liability. Now, like I said, I want to reiterate, I haven't reached my conclusions, but it's a lot of stuff on the internet claiming a massive cover-up. Cover-up or not, this problem has to be looked at. At least we should take a good look now, rather than let it get really big.
bad, right?
And some people claim that the problem, when the stuff aerosolizes and goes all over the world and the radioactivity is now out there, some people claim it's not even an issue of liability and cover-up. It's an issue of a health crisis.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, forget it. You're not here to collect on your liability if you're going to die. So this is a very strange thing. Medically speaking, I have never quite seen anything like the Gulf War syndrome, and nobody has. And you dismiss it because what? You can't find the cause? Now there's indications that we should be looking at these people with very sensitive urine tests. Do you have any questions?
Well, first question, what can we do about it?
Well, we've got to support this bill to say if DU was used in Hawaii or not. That test we will do is a marker that munitions were used. That's the most sensitive marker we have. We also have another marker that's quite sensitive. If you think it was used, but the military cleaned up the target site, and it's real hard to clean it up so well, then we will test people, civilians, guard, anyone,
At certain
kind of
distance.
downwind, yeah, because it's supposed to persist for several years in their urine, a correct urine, a 24-hour captured urine. And I hope these people don't say, oh yeah, it's positive because I was deployed during Gulf War. Okay, well, we don't want these people. We want people who have
Sure.
been in the, you get that
That have
part.
not been
Yes.
exposed to it. Right.
Now, what do you want to argue? For the sake of Hawaii, we should look in this? Well, if Hawaii starts to raise a ruckus, I mean, wouldn't anybody else say, hey, what about our target sites? Hey, what about our civilians? What about blah, 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 blah? So, you kind of like playing with fire here, right?
Well, what choices are there?
To me, there's no choice.
That's what I mean.
There's no choice. But if you want to cut it off, you can say, I'm just doing this for Hawaii. And when people call us up and say, hey, I heard you found this, I'm just going to say, I don't care about Missouri, I don't care about Iraq. I'm just doing this for Hawaii. You draw your own conclusions. That's real strange, because Dr. Bertel is not from Hawaii. She's from Pennsylvania. And she helps us trying to figure out what's the test to do. She's developing the test. So you can't just say, well, I'm just doing this for Hawaii, good luck, the rest of you, because other people have helped us. Now, that's your call, how far you want to take it outside this. And, you know,
Is there any solution that's workable here? Short of a giant expose and a very expensive solution that will further damage our financial stability?
I've heard it quoted, and I believe it is a physician who used to be here on the island 20 years. You can, the bill, people say, can we afford to do this, run the test and all. Her claim is you cannot
Afford
not
to.
do it. Yeah, but you cannot afford to not do it. In other words, you must do it. If you don't, you will see all hell break loose.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, we haven't found it yet. We're just asking to look. And we're asking to look at the impact site on the target zones, not way out in the periphery where you won't see it.
So what can our audience do? Be petitioning and
Yes,
soliciting?
the bill
their
passed the House.
representatives? Okay.
And I can't remember the name, but you can find it on there's only one bill remaining, and it's going before the Senate. And all of a sudden now, that we changed the rules that we wanted to monitor at the target, now the military is interested in all. Because before, to me, it's what they call the fool's chase. Go ahead, do your tests. I'll prove to you there's nothing, because you're looking in the wrong area. You remember, if you look at 500 yards, and I'm claiming it spreads all over, that's the gas. The gas blows away. The soil's not contaminated, maybe, but not contaminated 500 yards. But the gas has gone out.
Right. And it was on purpose. And they knew. The old story.
I don't know
How
if they got
often
it. I don't.
Doesn't
No,
sound
there's-
similar to a GMO thing.
Put it
You know,
this
it's
way.
like the same kind of
There's
an
more.
issue.
No. Now, in fairness, the GMOs, I claim they did not know. They do not want to look. They did not know. Tobacco knew, and they hid the reports, the 4,000 reports that was subpoenaed by Stan Glantz at UCSF. And when we got those reports, we said, damn it, you knew. Now, when we sue, you're liable. This one, there are people more expert than me who claim they knew. The guy wrote the manual. There's, actually, I've seen the documents. He writes for the Army that these people must be monitored, and they're not. Eric Shinseki, remember? He signed that we should monitor our soldiers. He was correct. And he disappears. He was dismissed. Eric Shinseki. Now, I don't know what he was dismissed for. They said he confronted Rumsfeld because he said we needed more troops, and Rumsfeld said no. I don't know, but he did support the testing of soldiers in the most sensitive tests we knew, the monitoring from, and he did raise a flag about these things. The problem at Walter Reed, all these generals leaving, personally, this is my opinion, generals don't leave because of moldy rooms. They fix moldy rooms. When you fix...
Are you guys aware what we're talking about? That there's been...
accusations of lousy care of the veterans, starting with Walter Reed. And the lousy care is because of runaround, long wait lists, moldy rooms while they wait for their disposition. Now, it is said that for every person waiting at Walter Reed, there's 16 who are out there who aren't trying to seek care because it's such a hassle. It's called the gatekeeper. You make things inconvenient for them to get care, and then they don't come. Well, when they do come, they'll be complaining about vague symptoms again, called Gulf War symptoms. People don't know what to do with them. And then they're going to pick up on the internet, stuff that's on the internet that says, why don't you give me a 24-hour urine screen? Then that will come before the public, before the Senate. And we're not talking about, these are the issues, not maybe a little bit moldy rooms and long wait lists. But is this the gatekeeper method to keep veterans who are complaining off our back? I mean,
Does appear to be.
don't forget, I'm a veteran. I wasn't wounded in war, but this is awfully a strange thing. Now, as they follow the veterans, they're finding disproportionately high occurrence compared to age-matched non-veterans of all kinds of strange things. And if you make Walter Reed and all the military people receptive to their complaints, decrease the wait time, give them decent rooms to be in, they're compounding at your door.
So you think that the generals are leaving because they don't want to be there when all the shit hits the fan?
Put it this way, if I was a general and I had the excuse to leave for moldy rooms, I would leave on moldy rooms. knowing that I've seen the memo by General Pete signed before. It was a official Army memo to screen these guys. And people's going to say, well, why didn't we do it? Well, I don't know. You know, like the chickens are coming home to roost, and where's some accountability here?
Well, you know, I can see that we've been talking a while, and the tape is already flashing at us. What do you hope we can do from here?
Support this bill. Start monitoring. If we find something, have the courage to say we found it. Don't try to cover it up, because the Iraqi civilians will complain because they need the same treatment. And just look at it from a human point of view. You could have been born an Iraqi civilian.
So we're basically asking for you, the public, to not let this one go by and get moldy.
Yeah.
Right? Not
Yeah.
let this one go by and become something that later is compounded because we let it go and let it get worse.
Oh yes, it will get worse unless you nip this. Well, it's already out. It's not nipped in the bud, but it will get worse if it's truly what they say it is. Like I said, I haven't looked, so I don't know what's here. But knowing what these people have said, you'd be a damn fool not to look.
Will you come back and keep us posted on what's going with this?
We will. This goes before the Senate on Monday, the first committee, and I'll go give testimony.
Okay, so by the time you see this, we'll be reading it in the news, and you may have seen the second part of this story, but we wanted to hear it pure and straight from the horse's mouth.
Yes.
Thank you for having the courage to be involved in something like this.
Welcome.
Thank
Keep
you.
in touch.
Aloha.
No matter where you go, no matter what you do, take that Maui style with you. Cause if you ain't Maui style,